trip into the mountains, a walk through a crowded city, an afternoon at the beach, and another long shift beneath the summer sun. None of the people in these stories knew that something was already waiting for them, hidden inside a routine moment, an overlooked danger, or a decision that could not be taken back. Each story serves as a reminder that the line between an ordinary day and an unimaginable nightmare can be frighteningly thin. Come with me into the cellar as we uncover 4 more horrible fates. Brooke Day was not someone who approached the snow-covered mountains carelessly. She was 22 years old and came from Queensland's Sunshine Coast in Australia. Friends, relatives, and former teammates remembered her as athletic, dependable, and safety-conscious. Brooke played Australian rules football for the Maroochydore Roos during both her junior and senior years. She also played rugby union with the Nambour Toads and had worked at the Alexandra Headland Surf Life Saving Club. Former colleagues remembered her for her kindness, humor, and the positive energy she brought into every room she entered. For Brooke, the act of snowboarding was not some new vacation hobby. Her family said she had been riding since she was 11 years old. By the winter of 2026, she was spending her 4th extended snow season in Japan and had previously worked at a physiotherapy business in the Hakuba region. She knew the environment, understood its risks, and had recently completed a 3-day avalanche rescue course. According to her parents, Brooke had already put that newfound training to positive use. She reportedly had helped rescue 4 people from what her family described as a life-threatening situation. Among the people who knew her, Brooke had earned herself a rather simple and straight-to-the-point nickname, the Safe One. Which brings us to the morning of Friday, January 30th, 2026. Brooke was snowboarding at Sigik Mountain Resort in the village of Otari in Japan's Nagano Prefecture. At approximately 9:02 that morning, she boarded the Sug No. 2 pair lift. Like many people entering mountain terrain, Brooke wore a backpack. Her family described it as an avalanche rescue backpack, equipment Brooke carried because conditions in the mountains can change quickly, and being prepared can sometimes mean the difference between life and death. Brooke wore the backpack to keep not only herself, but the people around her safe. As Brooke completed the ascent, the chair approached the upper station. Brooke began preparing to disembark. Attached to her backpack was a waist belt. In the present moment, the belt was not fastened around her body, leaving part of it loose and hanging freely. And at the end of that loose belt was a buckle. As Brooke moved away from the chair, that buckle became pinched or caught in part of the lift carriage. At the same time, the chest strap on Brooke's backpack remained securely fastened across her body. That combination would suddenly change everything. Had the backpack slipped freely from her shoulders, it might have remained with the chair while Brooke separated from it. But the chest strap kept the backpack connected to Brooke, and the loose waist buckle kept the backpack connected to the moving lift. Brooke attempted to free herself, but she was stuck to the lift. In a panic, Brooke found herself being pulled beyond the unloading area with the backpack still secured to her body. Later Japanese reporting, citing the Regional Bureau of the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism, said Brooke was carried approximately 17 meters or about 56 feet before the lift emergency stop was engaged. The chair came to rest with Brooke suspended approximately 8 meters or 26 feet above the ground. According to the regional authority, roughly 15 minutes or so passed before she was finally brought down. Resort employees began rescue efforts, and Brooke was swiftly taken from the mountain by ambulance. At that point, she appeared to be in cardiopulmonary arrest. The ambulance transported Brooke to Omachi General Hospital, where doctors and medical staff continued trying to save her life. Some early headlines in this story created confusion about exactly when Brooke passed on. She did not die at the resort that Friday. Her parents, Dean and Warren Day, traveled to Japan and were beside their daughter when she passed on in the hospital on Sunday morning, February 1st. They later said Brooke had passed peacefully with them at her side. Brooke's family thanked the friends who stayed with her, the people who rendered assistance at the mountain, and the hospital staff who did everything that they could. Her parents, sister Emma, and brother Kane then began the painful process of bringing Brooke back home to Australia. Which leaves the question, what caused her death? Well, the mechanical sequence of the accident is known. The loose buckle became caught in the lift chair, the chest strap prevented the backpack from separating from Brooke, and the moving chair pulled her beyond the unloading station. However, the precise underlying medical chain that caused Brooke's death has not been publicly detailed. Reports that she experienced cardiac arrest describe what happened to her heart, but cardiac arrest is not, by itself, an explanation of what produced it. It would therefore be irresponsible to state that Brooke died from strangulation, asphyxiation, or any other specific injury unless Japanese authorities or her family decide to release that information. What can be said with certainty is that she suffered critical injuries during the entanglement and died in the hospital 2 days later. Sugik Mountain Resort immediately closed the number 2 pair lift while police and transportation authorities investigated the matter. The lift remained closed for more than 2 months before reopening on April 15, 2026. Inspections were completed and the lift's safety systems were all functioning. The company also increased staffing at the upper station. Before Brooke's accident, 1 employee had been assigned to monitor that area. Afterward, the resort required at least 2 attendants. The spacing between the lift chairs was also increased, giving employees more time to observe each passenger, provide instructions, and make a decision to stop the lift. The resort also introduced a new rule for those with backpacks. Instead of wearing them on their backs, passengers were instructed to remove them and hold them against the front of their bodies while riding the chairlift. The company also installed additional English language warnings and pictograms, expanding multilingual safety announcements, and conducted renewed staff training in emergency stopping, first aid, and the early recognition of unusual passenger movements. Those changes reveal the brutal simplicity of the danger Brooke encountered. She was not defeated by some avalanche. She was not caught in some blizzard or stranded outside in sub-zero temperatures. She was not lost while recklessly traveling through unknown backcountry. She was caught during one of the most routine moments of a day on the mountain, stepping off a chairlift. And the object that trapped her was the object she carried because she wanted herself and the people around her to be safer. On the morning of August 23, 2024, the Jalan Masjid India district of Kuala Lumpur was already awake. The area is crowded with shops, hotels, restaurants, and pedestrians. It is the kind of city street where the surface appears permanent, pavement beneath thousands of feet, buildings on either side, and an underground network that most people never need to think about. Vijaya Lakshmi Gali was 48 years old and came from Kupam in the Indian state of Andhra Pradesh. She had traveled to Malaysia with members of her family for an extended visit lasting approximately 2 months. Reports said they were preparing to return home the following day. Later reporting in the case described Vijaya as her family's primary breadwinner. Her husband suffered from several health problems, including diabetes, heart disease, and impaired mobility. Her income and support helped keep the family functioning. Her adult son, Surya, spoke of how central his mother was to his life. He struggled with the one detail that continues to torment him to this day, and that's the fact that his mother had never seen it coming. That morning, Vijaya was walking near the Masjid India shopping district, reportedly heading towards a nearby temple and planning to get breakfast. At 8:22 a.m., surveillance footage captured the moment the walkway beneath her suddenly failed. There was almost no warning. The section of the pavement folded inward. Vijaya dropped into an opening approximately 8 meters or 26 feet deep. People walking only a few steps away recoiled from the edge. Then, Vijaya was just gone. Another patron clung to what was left of the sidewalk and managed to get away safely. And beneath the ground, the opening did not end in an empty underground chamber. It connected to an active sewer environment beneath the city. Strong flowing water, debris, concrete, and confined pipes created the possibility that Vijaya had been carried away from the original collapse almost immediately. Kuala Lumpur's Fire and Rescue Department was notified through an emergency call at 8:22 a.m. Crews responded that morning, and excavators were used to enlarge the area around the opening, allowing rescuers to inspect beneath the pavement. Teams began examining 6 sewer manholes along a downstream route that eventually reached the Pantai Dalam sewage treatment facility. During the initial search, rescuers discovered Vijaya's footwear near the excavated area. Tragically, it would be the only physical trace of her they managed to recover. Over the following days, the search became increasingly complex. Crews used telescopic and remote cameras, tracker dogs, excavators, and ground-penetrating radar. They inspected the sewer network leading away from the sinkhole and searched the Pantai Dalam treatment plant where the system ended. A sewer jetting machine was sent through part of the underground route. Teams also attempted a technique known as flushing. Water was temporarily blocked inside sections of the sewer and then released, creating a strong current intended to dislodge debris or reveal a hidden obstruction. Rescue dogs and cameras indicated the possible presence of an obstruction farther inside the system. Investigators eventually identified a blockage approximately 44 meters from the sinkhole. The obstructed section was estimated to extend for about 15 meters inside the sewer line. If Vijaya had been carried away by the current, rescuers feared she might be somewhere behind it. Crews attempted to reduce and redirect the water so specialist divers could enter. These divers faced almost impossible conditions. The tunnel was narrow, visibility was extremely limited, hard debris and compacted material blocked the route, and the underground current was strong enough to endanger the rescuers themselves. In the end, the divers were unable to safely reach the obstruction. As the search entered its 6th day, another section of ground subsided approximately 50 meters from the original sinkhole. No one was injured in the second collapse, but authorities closed the road to vehicles and began examining the surrounding soil and utility systems. It was a warning that instability might not be limited to the single opening that had taken Vijaya. By the end of August, rescue personnel had spent more than a week searching beneath one of Kuala Lumpur's busiest districts. On August 31st, after 9 days of searching, authorities announced that the formal search and rescue operation would end. Other government agencies were expected to continue recovery-related work, but rescuers had been unable to find Vijaya or recover her remains. Any further attempts to send divers in could result in further loss of life, and no one wanted to further increase the overall tragedy. In October of 2025, Malaysia's Federal Territories Minister announced the findings of a government task force. Investigators concluded that the primary failure involved the structure of an underground sewer pipe. Chemical reactions had corroded and weakened the pipe, while instability in the surrounding soil contributed to the formation of a cavity beneath the pedestrian walkway. The task force rejected the theory that a shallow limestone cavern had directly caused the collapse. The limestone layer in that area was much deeper underground. The sidewalk above the cavity continued to look solid, its tiles remained in place, pedestrians continued walking across it, but beneath that finished surface, the material supporting it was disappearing. To this day, Vijaya's body has never been found, leaving her family struggling to obtain an official death certificate. Without that document, even basic legal matters, inheritance, financial claims, and compensation were difficult to pursue. On May 6, 2026, Malaysian authorities finally issued Vijaya's death certificate, and her family's attorney said the document would allow them to begin formally seeking compensation from the authorities. By then, approximately 20 months had passed since she stepped onto that sidewalk. Vijaya's disappearance was not an isolated warning. Across Malaysia, sinkholes have become a growing public safety concern as unstable soil, underground water movement, and deteriorating pipes quietly weaken the ground beneath roads and sidewalks. Most collapses will never become tragedies like this one, but Vijaya's fate revealed how quickly an unseen failure beneath a busy city can turn an ordinary step into a point of no return. For the Mattingly family, February 20th, 2024 had been almost exactly what a family vacation was supposed to be. Jason and Therese Mattingly had traveled from Fort Wayne, Indiana to Lauderdale-by-the-Sea, Florida with their 2 children, 9-year-old Maddox and 7-year-old Sloan. Sloan Ella Mattingly was a first-grade student at Lafayette Meadows Elementary School. Her family talked about her love for gymnastics, dancing in the living room, inventing games and making cards and bracelets for other people. She loved babies, Taylor Swift, and finding ways to make the people around her feel included. Her brother Maddox was not simply a sibling, he was described as being her best friend and her hero. The pair's parents later called the 2 children each other's built-in best friends. It was a beautiful, sunny day, and the family chose to spend that beautiful day at the beach. Jason later described the day as being just about perfect. As midday faded into the afternoon, they were relaxing and beginning to pack things up to head out. Sloan's parents considered themselves unusually cautious. When they took their children to the beach, they thought about waves, currents, and water safety. They stayed close to Maddox and Sloan, but the danger that came for them was not the ever-present ocean. See, Maddox and Sloan had been digging together in the dry sand. The hole they dug eventually reached an estimated depth of between 4 and 5 feet. It was taller than Sloan's chest and deep enough that its unsupported walls were holding back a large mass of loose sand. As the kids played, it all happened in an instant. The walls inside the hole failed. Maddox was immediately buried to approximately his chest. He could still breathe, but his sister Sloan, well, she had disappeared completely beneath the surface. For context, dry sand does not usually fall as one solid piece. The grains begin to flow. When one section collapses, the sand behind it loses support and follows suit. The material fills any available space, including the spaces rescuers create while attempting to dig someone out. Sloan's parents were only steps away. Therese later struggled with that fact. They had been right there, yet the transition from children playing to a life-threatening emergency happened faster than they could stop it, faster than they had any chance of seeing it coming. One moment there was a hole, the next moment Sloan was swallowed up beneath it. People all across the beach ran towards the family. Video taken by a bystander showed approximately 20 adults trying desperately to help. They dug with their hands and used plastic beach buckets to remove the sand, but the walls repeatedly collapsed inward. 2 people who called 911 identified themselves as nurses. One caller described an entire circle of people digging while no one could reach the little girl beneath them. Maddox was pulled out first. One of the nurses stayed with him while Therese returned to the hole and continued digging for Sloan. Lauderdale-by-the-Sea did not have lifeguards stationed on that beach. The first Broward County Sheriff's deputies reached the scene approximately 4 minutes after the collapse. Firefighters and paramedics arrived moments later. Professional rescuers took over using shovels and boards. The boards were placed around the hole to stabilize its walls and reduce the amount of sand continuing to fall into the space. It was a smart tactic and helped rescuers finally find and reach Sloan. Sloan was pulled out of the sand, but she no longer had a pulse. Paramedics immediately began resuscitation, and she was rushed to a nearby hospital. Tragically, Sloan was pronounced deceased later on that afternoon. Maddox survived. But in the space of a few minutes, the 9-year-old who spent his entire life beside his younger sister had become an only child. Their parents later said they were arranging help for him as he attempted to understand what he had experienced. The emergency affected even the professionals who responded to the scene. The paramedics who treated the two children were relieved from the remainder of their shift because of the trauma endured during the rescue. Which now leads us to the big warning. Why are holes on beaches so dangerous? A bucket of sand does not feel threatening, but once enough sand begins moving, its combined weight can pin a person's arms and legs, prevent the chest from expanding normally, and make self-rescue almost impossible. As the trapped person struggles, additional grains can flow into the small spaces around the body. Removing sand from above can also cause unsupported material along the walls to slide inward, replacing what rescuers have just removed. Unlike an excavation at a construction site, a beach hole normally has no engineered slope, no reinforcement, and no one inspecting its walls. It exists in a place associated with relaxation and childhood play. That makes the hazard difficult to recognize. A medical review of fatal and non-fatal sand hole collapses described the risk as deceptive, specifically because these incidents happen in recreational environments that people do not normally consider dangerous. Sloan's precise official medical cause of death has not been publicly released. For that reason, the safest factual description is that she died after being completely buried in the collapsed hole and could not be revived. Following the incident, Sloan's parents began speaking publicly because they did not want another family to discover the danger in the same way. Therese explained that they had always thought about water safety at the beach. The possibility that dry sand could suddenly engulf one of their children had never crossed her mind. The family encouraged warnings, patrols, and wider public education about deep holes. Lauderdale by the Sea subsequently changed its beach rules. An ordinance adopted in June 2024 prohibited people from digging holes or trenches deeper than 18 inches. It also required holes to be completely filled before the person who created them left the area. Experts have offered an even simpler guideline. A beach hole should never be deeper than the knee of the smallest person in the group. In the end, no ordinance can reverse what happened on February 20th. Sloan's passing is a tragedy, and all we can do now is let it serve as a reminder, as a warning, so that this never happens again. Satnam Singh was a 31-year-old migrant worker from India living in the Agropontino, a broad agricultural region south of Rome. The area produces melons, kiwis, artichokes, and other fruits and vegetables sold throughout Italy and beyond. Much of that work is performed by migrants. Some have legal residency and employment contracts. Others exist in a shadow system where their ability to work, find housing, or remain in the country can be controlled by employers, middlemen, and illegal labor recruiters. In Italy, this system of illegal recruitment and exploitation is commonly known as caporalato. Workers can be paid below legal wages, denied breaks, placed in unsafe environments, and threatened with dismissal or deportation if they complain. Satnam had no residence permit and no legal employment contract. Reporting after the incident said he earned approximately €5 an hour during long days in the field. His lack of legal status did not make the work any less real, and it did not make the machinery he used any less dangerous, and it certainly did not make his life less valuable. It simply made him easier to exploit. On Monday, June 17, 2024, Satnam was working on agricultural land near Cisterna di Latina. The work involved a roller-style machine towed by a tractor and used in the laying or wrapping of agricultural plastic. At some point during the operation, Satnam became caught in the equipment. As he struggled to free himself, pure horror occurred. The machine severed his right arm, which is bad enough in itself, but it also inflicted severe crushing injuries to his legs. The injury was absolutely catastrophic, but according to the forensic findings that emerged later, it was not necessarily unsurvivable. It's what happened after the machine was stopped that became the central issue in a homicide prosecution. According to Italian prosecutors, the man overseeing the farm, Antonello Lovato, did not immediately call emergency services. Instead, Satnam was placed into a van and driven away from the farm. He was taken to the place where he lived and left outside, bleeding and gravely injured. His severed arm was placed into a plastic crate normally used for collecting fruit and vegetables and was simply left sitting beside him. Soni, Satnam's partner, pleaded for help. A neighbor later recalled hearing her shouting for anyone to call an ambulance. The neighbor made the call. An emergency crews arrived and attempted to stabilize Satnam. Because of the seriousness of his condition, he was transported by helicopter to San Camillo Hospital in Rome. He remained alive for approximately 2 days, but on June 19, 2024, Satnam Singh passed away. A forensic examination after the incident determined that Satnam had died from massive blood loss. According to the statement released by prosecutors, medical experts concluded that he most likely would have survived if emergency treatment had been obtained promptly, and that finding changed the legal meaning of this entire case. Investigators were no longer looking only at how Satnam became entangled in the machine. They were examining whether someone had seen the severity of his injuries and understood that he could die and consciously failed to obtain immediate medical help. The question was no longer limited to whether workplace safety rules had been broken. It was whether the delay in treatment amounted to homicide. Descriptions of Satnam being left outside his home with his arm in a crate spread all across Italy like wildfire. Farm workers and trade unions organized demonstrations. Italy's president, Sergio Mattarella, condemned the cruel exploitation and inhumane conditions experienced by agricultural workers. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni called the treatment of Satnam barbaric and said it should be severely punished. The case also forced attention onto the labor system surrounding him. Statistics show that illegal employment was substantially more common in Italian agriculture than across the country's overall workforce. Trade unions argued that migrant laborers were routinely underpaid and exposed to unsafe working conditions while being too frightened or economically dependent to speak out. For many of those workers, Satnam's death was not viewed as a single isolated incident. It was seen as the most extreme result of a system in which a person could be treated as disposable. Italian police eventually arrested Antonello Lovato on July 2, 2024. Prosecutors initially considered a manslaughter case, but the accusation was upgraded to intentional homicide under the Italian legal doctrine of dolo eventuale, generally translated as eventual intent. That legal theory did not provide prosecutors to prove that Lovato planned the machinery accident or began the day intending to kill Satnam. Instead, they argued that Lovato understood how desperately Satnam needed medical treatment, recognized that delaying help could cause his death, and accepted that risk anyway. Lovato's trial opened in Latina on April 1, 2025. He denied wanting Satnam to die. Speaking in court, Lovato said he had lost his head after seeing the severity of the injury and was not himself at the time. His defense argued that the case should be treated as an aggravated workplace safety offense and negligent homicide, not intentional murder. Italy's largest trade union confederation, CGIL, joined the proceedings as a civil complainant. Outside the courthouse, agricultural workers gathered to demand not only justice for Satnam, but changes to the employment system that had left thousands of workers vulnerable. Recently, on July 8, 2026, just over 2 years after Satnam's death, the court convicted Antonello Lovato of intentional homicide with eventual intent. The court sentenced him to 16 years in prison. Prosecutors had requested a sentence of 22 years, but the judges recognized mitigating circumstances and imposed a lower term. The verdict was issued by a first-instance court. Lovato's attorney immediately announced that the defense intended to appeal. For that reason, the judgment is not yet 100% final, but I think the verdict still represents a significant legal conclusion. The The court accepted the prosecution's central argument. The failure to obtain immediate medical help was not merely panic or any ordinary mistake after an accident. It amounted to the conscious acceptance of the risk that Satnam would die. Satnam's injuries began with the machine, but the machine could not decide whether to stop work. It could not decide whether to call an ambulance, and it could not decide whether to treat the bleeding man in front of it as someone worth saving. People, human beings, made those decisions. There was a period after the accident when a different decision probably would have allowed Satnam Singh to live. And that is what makes his fate so difficult to understand. He was not hidden inside a cave. He was not lost at sea. He was not beyond the reach of emergency medicine. He was alive. He was in front of other human beings. Help could have been called, but instead, he was discarded and left to fend for himself, and by the time help did arrive, precious time had already been lost. A chairlift, a sidewalk, a beach, and a farm. None of these places looked like the entrance to a death trap, and that is the disturbing thread connecting these four stories. Catastrophe did not announce itself. It hid inside a loose strap, beneath a finished pavement, within a wall of soft sand, and behind the decision of someone who failed to call for help. Remembering these people means remembering more than the final moments of their lives. Brooke Day was a safety-minded athlete who had already used her training to help others in the mountains. Vijaya Lakshmi Gali was a mother and breadwinner whose family continues seeking accountability without ever having recovered her remains. Sloan Mattingly was a joyful 7-year-old whose family transformed private grief into a warning for millions of other parents. And Satnam Singh was a worker whose death forced a country to confront the human cost of exploitation. Their lives were larger than the circumstances that ended them, but those circumstances leave behind lessons that should never be ignored. In the end, I want to send my deepest condolences to all the friends and family of those lost in today's stories. Thank you all for watching today's video. If you enjoy what I do here on the channel, I would love it if you liked the video and left a comment down below telling me your thoughts on today's stories. A simple like and comment can go a long way in helping YouTube push my video out to more people. If you want to support the channel a little further, then please consider becoming a channel member. You get your name here at the end of every video, along with some other perks, and it goes a long way in supporting the work I do. Also, if you want to check out my content in an audio-only format, you can find The Cellar on every major podcast location. Now, with that all out of the way, I hope to see you all return next time, so you can join me as we head back into The Cellar.